To our second history lesson of the topic. Now, I think I might have got the history and geography lessons swapped around this week. I think I was maybe meant to do the history lesson on Tuesday and the geography on Wednesday, but it doesn't really matter. Now, we're going to be carrying on looking at the Mayans. So let's just have a quick recap on what we looked at last time. So, the nuggets of information we took from last time is that the Mayan civilization was based between North and South America. If you remember, it's that kind of little gap in between. The Mayan period happened at the same time as ancient Rome, ancient Greece, and the Egyptians. It just happened in a different place. Remember, all of these events can happen at the same time because they happen in different parts of the world. The civilization was discovered hundreds of years later, and after it had finished, by the Spanish conquistadors. Okay? Basically, the Spanish conquerors. Now, if you remember the story of the Spanish conquistadors, what did they find? Well, they found the ruins of temples, or what they thought were temples, buried in the jungle. So in the 16th century, they came across ruins of mysterious abandoned temples and cities. But it wasn't until 150 years later, in the 19th century, that historians and archaeologists really began to study these remains. So, let's just recap. Mayans happened hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Okay? Hundreds of years later, the ruins are discovered in the 16th century by the Spanish. But it takes another 150 years for archaeologists to study those ruins from way back when and work out what they were. So we're talking a long time from the Mayans to when the Mayans were discovered. A big, big gap. So, in the 19th century, archaeologists finally began to gain an understanding of the significance of the ruins and the artefacts. Basically, they worked out what they were. What does an archaeologist do? And how do they find out about the past? Well, that's what we're going to have a go at today. And I'm purposefully not going to reveal too much to you because you're going to take on the role of an archaeologist. You're going to look at some artefacts from actual artefacts, or pictures of them, from ancient Maya, and you're going to do what an archaeologist does, which is to look at it and make suggestions, make guesses about it, and what they tell us about life in ancient Maya. So, archaeologists use the objects and buildings that people in the past have left behind to learn about history. They look, they think, and they make guesses or suggestions about it. When they started to look at the ruins, they found a wealth of information about the Mayans. So, here's what an archaeologist does. They make an observation. They make an observation and an assumption based on what they can see and what they know from other cultures. So, they discover this temple in the middle of the jungle. What could they guess about the Mayan people if they had temples? If the Mayans had temples, what could we guess about them? What does it mean? Well, let me show you my thought process. So, they discover an ancient temple. Now, I know that in other civilizations, temples are used for worshipping gods, religion. They must have had some kind of religion, or they must at least have had gods to worship, or else they wouldn't have had a temple. The temple is large and made from stone. This means the Mayans must have had some similar building knowledge to the ancient Egyptians, because if you notice, they look very similar to the pyramids. Now I wonder, were they built by slaves? The pyramids were. Were the temples built by slaves for the ancient Mayans? If so, this means there must have been some kind of hierarchy where you've got the really rich and important people, and then you've got the slaves at the bottom. So, that's what an archaeologist does. They see something, they find an artefact, and they make suggestions about it, or predictions. Now, they're not completely wild predictions. They're based on logic and what they know about other cultures and other civilizations in the past. So, what I want you to do in a second is you're going to have a look at some of these sources and make predictions of your own. Now, you need to remember these are primary sources. Now, do you remember what a primary source is? Well, a primary source is something that is from the time. A secondary source is something that's written afterwards. Now, you may say, well, it's a photograph, so surely it's a secondary source. Well, yes and no. The fact it's an actual photograph would suggest, yes, it is. But it's a photograph of a real source. So actually, the bit we're looking at, the primary source, the artefact, is real. So therefore, it is a primary source. A secondary source would be something like an internet article that's been written. So, for example, our Mary Anning biography would be a secondary source because we're writing it after it happened, about her life. So, what do you think more reliable, primary sources or secondary sources? Well, the answer is primary sources are more reliable. They give us better information because they are real. The problem with a secondary source is it can be changed slightly by the person writing it. In today's English lesson, you'll notice when I talked about Mary's father dying, I said it was a short battle with tuberculosis. I don't know it was a short battle, I put that in there. But anyone reading it would assume that that was factual. With a primary source, what you see is what you get. Okay. In a moment, you're going to pause the video and have a look at the image cards that I have uploaded to the website. Okay. Those are images of the artefacts, and I really just want you to look at those. There is another document on there, but I don't want you to look at that yet. Please save that for afterwards, or it will kind of ruin the next activity. So, we're going to have a look at some of the image cards. Now I'm going to show you some of these so we can have a look at them together. So, let me see if I can find where I have hidden it. Okay, so we have a variety of different image cards for you to look at. Okay, and they're all of different things. Now, I'm just going to focus, because I want you to have a look at them, I'm just going to focus on this one here. And now I'm going to think about making predictions about it. So, I'm going to say that this is some kind of mask. It looks quite almost decorative. It looks like it's got some jewellery on it as well. I don't know whether it would be worn by a man or a woman. I'm not really sure. What does this tell me about the Mayans? Well, this tells me they had some very skilled artists or creators, I suppose, because this is quite decorative and quite, I imagine, quite difficult to make. What else does it tell me? Well, they had some interesting ideas about what earrings should be. I don't see any of these being worn today. Not particularly, anyway. But that is if they are earrings. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it's used for battle. If it's used for battle, that suggests they have wars. If they have wars, that suggests they must have an army. So I'm making suggestions as I go. Okay? Now, what I want you to do is to have a look through each of these images, one at a time, and just think about them. You don't need to write anything down, I just want you to think about them. Then come back to me. Okay, so once you've done that, what we're now going to do is I'm going to give you a variety of statements. So in the second document on the website, and I might put it on Seesaw as well, because I know some of you prefer that. On the second document on the website, which is here, let me show you it. You have a variety of statements that look like this. Now, these statements are either true or false. So you're going to look at the images and use the images to guess or make a prediction about whether you think these are true or false. So, for example, the Maya didn't know how to use paints. Well, based on the mask, I would say they did. So this statement is false. And then what you're going to do is you're going to move that one over to the false section. Now you can choose to do that if you want to, and if you can, by printing it out, cutting it and moving them, that's absolutely fine. If not, you could just write them out under the true or false section. Okay. Now what we want from you today in terms of a piece of work is for you to have written what the role of an archaeologist is. So a sentence about what an archaeologist does. I then want a sentence about why primary sources are useful, and we spoke about that. Rewind if you can't remember. And then what I want you to do is to write down 3 true statements and 3 false statements based on the activity you just did. So you don't do them all, because that would take you a long time. But I want you to do 3 true and 3 false. Unless you've cut them out and moved them, and then you can just do that. That's absolutely fine. Okay? Lovely. That's your activity for today. Hope you enjoy the lesson. Make sure you have a look at those images, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye.